What is up? Good evening and welcome to DFS Academy. Do you remember a week ago where we laughed and joked about how everybody was hurt and DFS was the only way to have fun in fantasy football? It's not a joke anymore. Everybody is hurt. The room is really on fire, and DFS is your only respite. We're going to build some lineups where guys can be healthy for at least 1 week. Let's get into it. What is up? Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever the hell you watch this show. This is DFS Academy. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. With me, as always, Austin Amandolia. Austin, I feel like the last couple nights we were mad we had to leave the Thursday game. I'm not too mad we have to leave the Jets versus Patriots Thursday game to record our show.
Well, funny story. I actually am a little bit mad because I have an underdog contest where I came into the night ranked 8th. And I have 2 players in the game tonight.
Okay.
So I'm watching it closely. But I'm a little mad you were like, "Oh, well, we don't have to worry about injuries in DFS." Ryan, come on.
Yeah. Oh, it gets even worse. As I was saying it, I remembered reading your list, and you have somebody on your list that I was flat out going to call you out on. So we'll get to that later on in the show. But yes, you definitely need to worry about injuries. It literally will make or break your lineup. I just mean you get to start the week when they're healthy. In some leagues, you don't even get that. I literally was in a league that has weird waivers. Waivers run at 7:00 every night, including Sunday night. It doesn't matter as long as they haven't played their game. I lost Evan Ingram at kickoff and I couldn't get anybody till 7:00. So I had to get, I'm blanking on the name right now, but like the backup tight end that was playing on Monday night and Gerald Everett from the Bears and hoping our Sunday night. And then I had to immediately pop him into my lineup. He did nothing. The Bears did nothing. None of it mattered. I got literally doubled up in that game, but just like with that game, I didn't even know who I was going to start at tight end until literally at kickoff. So it was a flat out mess. Guys, this is our weekly DFS show. If you are new, welcome. We are glad to have you. I have a feeling we'll be getting a lot of new people as the season progresses because everybody is hurt and we do have to set new lineups every week. And in DFS, at least you get to pick from the entire player pool. If you guys already play DFS and you would like to play against Austin, myself, and some other great folks at Club Fantasy, you will find links in the description of this video to jump into just a little $2 contest with us over on DraftKings and FanDuel. Links for both contests in the description and in Austin's DFS article that will drop on Saturday. Also, if you haven't already, Club Fantasy has like 12 shows now. We help you in every facet of fantasy football. It costs you absolutely nothing to like, subscribe, do all those things that all content creators ask you to do so that they can make a little money off of Google. They certainly have enough to give us. I just need you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button to help us along there. Austin, we start the show off with answers to the test. This is the person who doesn't need ad revenue because they just won $1 million last week. The Milli Maker lineup was, I'm going to skip quarterback because 95% of this lineup makes sense. Alvin Kamara, Jordan Mason, Marvin Harrison, what a welcome coming out party. Chris Godwin, Malik Neighbors, kind of another coming out party. Trey McBride, J.K. Dobbins in the Arizona defense. I will say I didn't see Arizona coming the way they came in. But Austin, it had to bring a smile to your face typing in that Daniel Jones at quarterback won somebody $1 million last week.
Yeah, it's just a bummer. I feel like they should send me some of that money because I've been such a big Daniel Jones fan over the year. What's funny about this, Ryan, is I actually had a lineup that had Daniel Jones at the quarterback spot because I listened to, as you know, DFS and betting, the Fantasy Footballers DFS and betting podcast. Actually, I cashed with a lineup with Daniel Jones in it. Finished 421st in a pretty large contest, and actually, in the largest contest I entered, finished just outside the top 500 when there were over 22,000 entrants. So that's pretty decent for a tournament. It's not $1 million worth, but yeah, Daniel Jones. It was the week because the matchup was beautiful for Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I mean, we knew Washington could be thrown on, and Washington, I think, is going to be a defense we're going to pick on from this point forward. And so I made multiple lineups that had Neighbors and Wandale involved, but I never would have thought to throw their quarterback in there. So kudos to this new millionaire, and kudos to you, Austin. Austin, before we get into cash plays, I want to ask you a question about contest selection. I obviously do DFS ranking with football guys. I don't pretend to be a DFS expert, but I know enough that I can rank 8 guys every week at every position for our consensus rankings. But they were talking about a tournament over on FanDuel, and I kind of wanted to get your take on this to ask you if this is more tournament or if this is more cash. And I think I understand, but I want to ask you. So there is a tournament right now that's called like the $500,000 Sunday Rush. And it is a guaranteed overlay tournament. It is a $3 multi-entry, and they're only doing 150,000 entries. So they know they're only going to bring in 450,000. They are giving away $50,000 at minimum of their own money. But top 50% pays. Now it's still top heavy. The big money is paid at the top like a tournament, but top 50% pays screams out like head to head as well, or not head to head, but 50-50s. So my question to you is, when building lineups for that, should I go into that with the approach of I just want to beat 50% of the field? Or is it one of those like magical rare things where I get to kind of build my lineup my way, where I kind of want to be top half, but I also want to beat 50% of it? Like, it's a weird one to me, and I wanted to ask you about it. I didn't know if that was one you were heavily involved in or even aware of.
Yeah, I remember seeing this one come out. I haven't participated in it yet, because the other thing about it, it's 150 entries max.
Yes.
So,
and I know a sharp already who told me about this tournament who max enters it every single week. So
yes. And so there are a couple of things about this. I guess technically it can fall in the cash category. I would be thinking of it as a tournament though, because of the fact that the key feature of tournaments is that the most money is at the top, whereas cash tournaments, everybody who wins gets the same amount of money.
For sharps who are going in for the big money, a safe lineup, if you're just looking to build bankroll, feels like it might be able to easily fall into the 500 or top 50%, because the other guys are swinging for the fences on every play too, though. So
yeah, so there's an interesting thing here where if somebody is max entering this contest, I would be very fascinated to talk to your sharp contact on this, because I could easily see a scenario where that sharp person said, I'm playing 50 of my lineups as my cash lineups, because the best cash lineup players in the world will enter those 20 max cash entries and just spam the same lineup, because they know enough people that are less into DFS will enter those that they can easily beat. And then you still have 100 entries to play with and play for that high upside. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was a little bit of both. And if I'm entering this contest, I'm going in with a tournament mindset, because my goal is still to win the top prize. And I'm going to focus my cash lineups in cash settings where I feel like I have a better chance of having a high success rate.
So he warned, get in early because it fills up fast. But then I checked today and it was not even like 33% filled yet. So I have 10 lineups in right now, and then I kind of want to mess and see if I want to get any more. They actually have a similar tournament for a quarter, if there's anybody looking to kind of dip their toe, where it's guaranteed overlay, top 60% pays. But again, it's a fucking quarter. So I don't know how much. I didn't even look at like what the top end of it pays, but I threw my 10 lineups in there too. But just something interesting. I wondered how you would approach that as I was creating my lineups today. But now let's get into the actual cash play. So if you've not tuned into our show before, we break our show down into 2 segments: cash plays, which are the tournaments where you're almost looking to just double your money. Austin will explain it better than I ever will, but it's your bankroll builders. And then towards the end of the show, Austin and I give our favorite big tournament plays to kind of get different things. Hopefully the players that are going to help you win $1 million. But we start with cash because that's Austin's specialty. And we start with top of the class. These are the higher priced players. We're talking $8,000 and above. This is typically one player. I don't think Austin's ever went to one player who you are willing to pay up for in DFS. Austin, let's get into it.
Yeah, well, and the hard thing about this is that there's only like 4 players, maybe 5 players that are
not
at
even
the 8K.
Qualify anymore.
Yeah, and talk about healthy players. There's only like 2 or 3 at this point, right? Like Christian McCaffrey, he's still above 8K, but he's not starting this week. Justin Jefferson was questionable. He's been ruled that he's playing, so that works. But Tyreek Hill, it has Skylar Thompson at quarterback.
Yeah, I was going to say, Tyreek Hill's not questionable. His entire team is questionable.
Right. So there's not a lot of options here. But there is one player above 8K that I do think is worth targeting, and I think will be a staple in cash lineups. That is Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is coming off an 11 reception, 119-yard game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He still has not scored a touchdown this year, which I do not understand how that is possible, but here we are. He's going up against the Arizona Cardinals. And even though the Cardinals have been a little bit of a frisky defense this year, I don't trust them to sustain that. They just, some of their numbers are skewed right now by the fact that they just played like the 4th string tackles for the Los Angeles Rams, plus
and their 6th string wide receivers.
Exactly. Like rough situation there. So I'm not like considering that as, illustrative of what's going to happen moving forward. I'm going to play Amon-Ra St. Brown against the Cardinals. It's also the highest over under on the slate, so he should be utilized pretty heavily.
Yeah, I like that game a lot. But Austin, one of the things that jumped out to me, I believe you said the prices, but just in case you didn't, 8,200 on DraftKings, 9,100 on FanDuel. When I created my rankings, I immediately jammed ARSB into my DraftKings full PPR rankings. We only ranked 12 players at the wide receiver and running back. I couldn't fit him into my FanDuel, Austin, at that high price point and his inability to score. So I wasn't able to really get him into my top 12 for FanDuel. Is this a situation where you're much more likely to pay up for him in DraftKings, or are you still finding a way to fit him into those FanDuel lineups?
Yes, that's a very good point. This is more of a DraftKings play for me, just because the PPR upside of Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's more of a volume hog than he is a touchdown scorer. On FanDuel, you really need, I almost said underdog, because it's also a half point PPR site on both sides. So like if you're doing some of the snake drafts on underdog, I feel the same way about Amon-Ra St. Brown, where I like him a little bit less because he needs touchdowns on that site. Players that score touchdowns on half PPR sites are going to have the higher upside. It's a different story for DraftKings. DraftKings also gives the bonus points if they score 100 points. So I like Amon-Ra St. Brown primarily over there. I'd probably avoid him a little bit on FanDuel, except maybe in tournaments.
Yeah, I was going to say, in DraftKings, Amon-Ra St. Brown just feels like the cheat code, because when he hits for 120 yards and 10 catches. And that's exact, like, you don't care if he scores. That's literally, I don't even want to call it the icing on the cake if he scores. It's basically the cherry on top, because what he did to get into the end zone is far more important over there. So I like that a lot. We're going to move on to the band nerds section. These are your $6,000 to $8,000 players. Very good players, but just a little bit too much time practicing with their instrument to reach the top of the class. Austin, we got a couple of players in common here. I'll let you take over.
Yeah. So first off, I've got Kyler Murray, who is $6,900 on DraftKings and $8,300 on FanDuel. The idea here is he just has the rushing upside. I like the floor with him. His matchup is okay. Detroit has not done super well against quarterbacks so far. They gave up a rushing touchdown to Baker Mayfield. Not great. And so I like Kyler. He's been playing really well. He's got the pass catcher. So it feels easy. He'll probably be one of the more highly rostered quarterbacks on the slate. And I think I feel like he's going to have some of the less variance on the season for some of the quarterbacks that we'll be targeting. We saw the downside of Anthony Richardson last week, so I'm going to stick with Kyler this week. I think he's got to stay floor 6,900. He needs like 19 points to pay off his salary. That's easy for him.
I was going to say, with the way he is playing right now, you kind of called us out on it earlier. I think this was in the private chat because you weren't able to make the ranking shows, but there's we all had Kyler Murray too low. We weren't ready to kick him up, and we're about to all look very, very silly because this guy looks amazing. It's amazing when you get a guy, a wide receiver one, how much better he can look, because no offense to Hollywood Brown, but we see where he is already. And Kyler Murray hasn't looked great since DeAndre Hopkins. And it seems like he has his new DeAndre Hopkins, especially after that first touchdown catch on Sunday out of Marvin Harrison Jr. I like that pick. I love your next pick. He's going to come up in the tournament section as well, but talk to me about my guy, Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming off of an incredible week where he got 7 catches for 117 yards and a touchdown. This week, Tampa Bay matches up against the Denver Broncos, which everybody is going to be concerned about that Pat Surtain shadow. But that is going to impact Mike Evans. That should keep Chris Godwin free for targets. So I'm expecting him to continue the target volume. Also, it's just been consistent so far this year. It's like we're getting back to 2022 and 2021 Chris Godwin when Tom Brady was the quarterback, where he was just always getting peppered with targets. I think that's kind of what we're getting now. So I'm sticking with him in the cash this week. He's $6,500 on DraftKings, 66 on FanDuel. So I even like him a little bit on FanDuel because he could score a touchdown. And I think the volume will carry him. Again, this is another guy. He needs like 18 points to pay off his salary. If he catches 7 balls for 100 yards, he's more than done that.
I really like that point you said that he can score a touchdown, because when I was doing my rankings, I thought the exact same thing with Godwin, where it's kind of a habit to kind of, if you like Godwin, you like him on DraftKings, and then you kind of move Mike Evans in for FanDuel. But again, we talked about this. Evans is very likely to see Surtain, and I think that's just going to open Chris Godwin up. And why that's okay is Baker is already leaning on Godwin. It's not like you're worried like, oh, now is Baker really going to move away from Mike Evans? Yes, he's going to, and he's going to lead on Godwin. When you go back to week 1 with, Surtain covering DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett saw 7 targets in that game, caught 6 for 77 yards. I love Tyler Lockett. Chris Godwin is far better than Tyler Lockett. He could damn near double those numbers. We could be talking about the next coming of Amon-Ra St. Brown in that matchup. We'll put a pin in Chris Godwin because we're going to come back to him later. But I love everything you said there. You addressed the main thing I wanted you to, which was the Patrick Surtain. Moving on to the $4,000 to $6,000 players. We call these the bookworms. Noses in the books, easily underestimated, but look out, they're sharp. Austin, you got some names I don't automatically love here. I think you can convince me for one, but not the other.
Oh, I'm very curious which one it is. So I'm going to start with...
They're in the order of where you can convince me versus when you can. I just hate that Freiermuth. But anyway.
Okay, well, I'm going to start with Jauan Jennings, who is $4,100 on DraftKings, $5,200 on FanDuel. This is a case where we're getting a discount because of injury situations happening in San Francisco. It seems like Deebo Samuel is trending towards not playing. He did not practice on Wednesday, did not practice on Thursday. If he doesn't practice on Friday, when this show drops, probably not going to play on Sunday. So Jauan Jennings will slot into that wide receiver 2 role. He's a capable receiver. He can slot into that and take a good share of targets. He also has the 4th best matchup this week. The Rams have been rough against receivers since dating back to week 16 of last year. So I love the matchup there. Also, because he's $4,100, he just needs 12 points to pay off his salary.
And you hit on something. Again, we try to do as much teaching on this show as we can. Of course, it's the DFS Academy. You hit on something that I think needs to be emphasized with cash games, and that is buy the injury discount. When you're in tournaments, everybody's buying the injury discount. So maybe that's when you need to pivot, unless it's a smash play, kind of like Jordan Mason was these first 2 weeks.
Yes.
But when you are in cash, I don't care if everyone's buying the injury discount. You also need to buy the injury discount. And then hopefully you are better utilizing the excess funds than your opponents did when you're paying up for the players elsewhere. But when you have guys like Jauan Jennings, and maybe to a lesser degree, I don't think he made the show sheet, but Demarcus Robinson, guys who are being thrust into a role that FanDuel and DraftKings aren't necessarily accounting for them in yet. Those are the types of players for cash lineups you need to kind of pin, correct?
Yeah, that's totally accurate. And you're actually alluding a little bit to one of my tournament picks for that very reason of moving off of the guy that people are going to be targeting for injuries. But I have another player to convince you on right now.
I was going to say, this is the one where I don't even know that I hate Pat Freiermuth. I hate Arthur Smith. Shout out to Darnell Washington playing that new Jonnu Smith role, my guy. But anyway, go ahead and do your best convincing act.
Okay, I got you. I'm gonna go ahead and pull up Pro Football Reference real quick because I want the specific stats because they stuck out to me whenever I was looking at Pat Freiermuth for this week.
And I feel like Pat Freiermuth is going to be a popular pick because the matchup is a fantastic matchup. Now I'm looking at Football Guys rankings, and no, we're not affiliated with Football Guys, but I am. And Freiermuth made the DraftKings rankings, but not the FanDuel. And I have a feeling that's because of the addition of the Sunday night game on FanDuel, where you're able to fit Kyle Pitts and Travis Kelce into your rankings over there. So
yeah, that is fair. So through 2 weeks, week 1, Pat Freiermuth, 4 catches on 4 targets for 27 yards.
Okay.
Week 2, 4 catches on 4 targets for 39 yards. Week 3, 4 catches for 4 targets on 4 targets
for 40 something yards based on the history. So
no, I mean, honestly though, like it was the 4 catches that got me, right? Like,
yeah, that's awesome.
He's 4K on DraftKings. He's 5,200 on FanDuel. I kind of wanted to pay down at tight end this week. I didn't love some of the more expensive options. Like, I think Trey McBride is probably a good option this week because of the consistency we started to see last week. But Detroit, like sometimes they're they're very hit or miss over the middle of the field. So
it depends on how they choose to use Brian Branch, it feels like, because if they put him on a tight end, he takes Trey McBride out of the game. But if they decide to have him float around and stop the run, Trey McBride eats. So
right. So it feels a little bit frisky for a cash lineup. So right now I'm looking at Pat Freiermuth. Now, if injuries happen, if I decide, I don't know, Amon-Ra St. Brown like suddenly downturns or pulls up tight in the pregame warmups, I might try and pivot and get Trey McBride in or somebody else at tight end. But I'm spending down at tight end this week, and Pat Freiermuth feels pretty good. Feels like there's some consistency there.
Now, I'll admit, you're getting me with the 4 catches. And for folks who are listening to this who haven't paid a ton of attention to fantasy scoring this season and scoffing at 4 catches for 29 yards, tight end has been abysmal this year.
Yes.
I think there are 3 tight ends that are outscoring like the top 10 kickers or something like that. Like tight end has just been bad. So 4 catches for a tight end, if he starts to see touchdown volume, he's going to be a top 5 play before you blink your eyes on that one. So don't scoff too much, because volume is king with tight end. And this season, there's just not very many players getting volume, Austin.
Yeah, exactly. And right now, if you go into your DraftKings app, it's going to make it look like the Los Angeles Chargers have been just shutting down tight ends just out the gate. Well, they played Brock Bowers in their first matchup and gave up 6 catches for 58 yards. That's a pretty solid day for a tight end. That was really like Brock Bowers
tight end 3 that week.
Exactly. Yeah. Last week they played the Carolina Panthers. Don't forget that. We have a couple weeks of data. So it is very easy for stuff to get skewed. And even playing the Carolina Panthers, they gave up 3 receptions and 23 yards to Tommy Tremble. Yep. I'm pretty confident Pat Freiermuth is better than Tommy Tremble. And I am very certain that the Pittsburgh Steelers are better than the Carolina Panthers. So I feel good about Pat Freiermuth continuing to have a consistent role in this offense.
No, those are some good points. I think you may have convinced me. I actually looked. He was actually number 6 in my DraftKings rankings, but I'm one of the ones where FanDuel gave me the Sunday night, and I love Pitts. And man, am I holding on to a prayer with Travis Kelce right now? I need my guy to show up there. Austin, let's move on to the punt plays. Fewer than $4,000 cost. C's get degrees is what we call this category, because they're out there. They need to fill your lineups. These are some players you're going to need as well. And Austin, you're going with a defense this week.
Yeah, I'm going with the defense for the 3rd weekend in a row. I can't find any cheap players that I'm excited about.
The punt plays have been pretty awful lately. Like when I go even to my own rankings and try to find like that last roster filler, I end up not being able to find a guy. Now, what I will say is you got close with you did. Jauan Jennings is 4,100. And then another guy who I like, I don't know his exact price off the top of my head, but he was down at the cheap. Wan'Dale Robinson's pretty low right now. So in a DraftKings format, I feel like he's looking like a PPR darling a little bit right now, but I digress.
Yeah. So I ended up going with the defense. I got the Green Bay Packers, is $3,300 on DraftKings, 4K on FanDuel. The whole deal, whenever we're doing our cash defenses, it's going to be, what does the matchup look like? The matchup is Will Levis. Will Levis has made some bad plays.
Yeah.
Very.
You could argue he has the 2 worst plays of the NFL season already. So.
Yeah, very public bad plays where he has had a couple of pick sixes. I'm not betting on that happening again, but he takes sacks.
So you won't be sad if it does.
I won't be sad if it does. And it's a low over under, so it's not going to be a high scoring game. I feel good about the Green Bay Packers defense. They've been like hit or miss a little bit. They gave up a ton of points to the Philadelphia week 1, but it was a weird game, slippery field.
And they shut down. They slowed down Jalen Hurts.
Yes.
And they shut down Anthony Richardson. Now, the question is, are they just really good against mobile quarterbacks, or are they really good at adapting to the quarterback? Now, I don't think you have to be really good to shut down Will Levis, but what I'm saying is they've shut down better quarterbacks than Will Levis. That's for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So I very much am playing the Packers this week, but also don't overthink the defense. Just don't play the Panthers right now.
Yeah, that's kind of where it stands. I was a little disappointed. You talk about this all the time where it seems like one site is always quicker to move than the other site. DraftKings has the Las Vegas Raiders at such a reasonable price taking on the Carolina Panthers. FanDuel moved them to 5,000, the highest they ever priced defenses, and moved them straight to the top. So in DraftKings, I find the Raiders to be a very playable defense. And FanDuel, I'm not touching them. I never will pay for the top defense. I'm certainly not paying $5K for a defense. And then like the 49ers are like 4,200 taking on the depleted Rams after what we just saw the Cardinals do last week. So no, I like that Packers pick. They made my list. I think they're top 5 for me on all formats as well. So I think that's a great pick. And I think for all the reasons you pointed out, but most importantly, Will Levis loves to turn a ball over. He is becoming a fantasy defense darling. That is for sure. He might take over if the Panthers are actually good with Andy Dalton. I don't think they will be, but it could be where we pick on Will Levis instead of picking on the Panthers. That's going to wrap up our cash play segment. And now what we're going to do is pivot over to tournament talk. So with this section, Austin and I are going to give some of our favorite plays at each position. Typically in tournaments, you're looking to get a little different, not do the exact same thing that the field is doing. So what we're going to do, like I said, is just each kind of give our favorite picks. Austin's going to have more than me because he does this. I don't, but I do have favorite plays at each position. Austin, go ahead and get us started with CJ Stroud.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm very excited to have discovered this one because I almost went with Jared Goff again this week because I like the matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. I think people are going to look at his average scoring and go away from him. So shout out to Jared Goff, but I'm going with CJ Stroud, who is $7,100 on DraftKings, $8,200 on FanDuel. The basic idea here is that the Minnesota Vikings are very big on blitzing. And so far, through 2 games in the season, not a huge data point, but regardless, the top rated passer when blitzed per PFF this year is CJ Stroud.
CJ Stroud.
That's the argument.
I don't think you need to make much of an argument, but then you throw in the fact that Joe Mixon feels extremely unlikely to play, and they're not going to lean on Cam Akers the way they lean on Joe Mixon. And Dameon Pierce is also questionable. So they may have Cam Akers and Dario Ngumbawale as their like main running backs. This could be CJ Stroud throwing the ball 45 times this week. So.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing about this is just, I think people are going to overlook CJ Stroud this week because he hasn't like had a big ceiling week, but they've got a 24-point implied team total. If he passes for 3 touchdowns, he's going to be pushing you up the board in tournaments. So I'm a big fan of him this week, especially because of the type of contest I play in. I play in smaller tournaments. So yeah. I don't need to hit like a 230-point week to win one of those tournaments. But I think CJ Stroud, like I could see him easily pushing 25, 30 points this week, which would be great for a tournament.
I think I'm going to be wrong here, and I want you to tell me if I am. But my thought process on selecting Derek Carr in a tournament play goes back to what I'm seeing on the redraft side of things. So Derek Carr is insanely cheap, $5,800 on DraftKings, $7,900 on FanDuel. So not so cheap on FanDuel. They're catching up a little bit as they did with the Las Vegas Raiders. Derek Carr is the QB2 in fantasy right now. However, in redraft, Austin, I was able to go pick him up off of free agency. Didn't even have to go waivers. Nobody wants Derek Carr, and I'm thinking that's going to translate over into DFS. So my first question to you is Derek Carr far too chalky for tournament play at that $5,800 price point?
I don't think so at all, because I don't think he's going to be someone that people are excited to play. I think people are still going to be like, oh, it's Derek Carr. What's he going to do? Is Alvin Kamara.
Literally my thoughts. And so this is where I want to come in and say, right now, Derek Carr, as I mentioned, QB2 in fantasy, but the Eagles give up the 10th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. They gave up 240 and 2 touchdowns to a little bit more than 240 to one of them, but Jordan Love and Kirk Cousins hit 240 and 2 touchdowns. With the way Derek Carr is playing, he might have 240 and 2 touchdowns at halftime. What you have to hope is that the Eagles can keep it a game because the Saints are playing in these blowouts. We may not have seen Derek Carr ceiling the way he's playing right now because they don't have to throw the ball in the second half and certainly not in the fourth quarter. Obviously, he's going to come back down to earth, Austin. I just don't think it's going to be this week against Philadelphia.
Yeah, well, and to your point, he's got the second best game environment on the slate. This game has the second highest over under. It's at 49.5 points. Believe it or not, the freaking New Orleans Saints have a 26-point implied team total on the week. They're favorites going into this week. So it's a really good game environment, and it's going to be close that he might have to pass the ball a decent amount. If he scores 2 or 3 touchdowns, especially at his price point, like I don't hate this one at all. I'm not playing him on FanDuel. I'm going to say that the price is too high for me.
Yeah, I was going to say he's creeping on FanDuel, and I'll pay the extra $300 for CJ Stroud over there. So
yeah, but on DraftKings at 5,800, like, geez, you could cram a couple of elite guys in on DraftKings with the price that Derek Carr's at.
No, I agree. Moving on to the running backs. I want to start with a guy that I think the whole world is waiting to see do something. And if he doesn't do it this week against the Carolina Panthers, it might be time to cut bait with Zamir White.
Yes, that's exactly why I'm picking him, because if he doesn't do it this week, when's he going to do it? And I honestly, I could see Alexander Madison being more highly rostered than Zamir White because he's been a little bit better, and he's
certainly cheaper.
And he's cheaper. But Zamir White, he's $5,500 on DraftKings. He's $6K on FanDuel. Here's the thing about this. I don't even need Zamir White to smash. I don't need him to hit the ceiling that people may have been hoping when they were drafting him as like a RB2 in redraft or in the preseason and best ball leagues. I need him to get to 16.5 points. He can do that by rushing 50 yards, fall in the end zone, catch a couple passes. I don't need him to do too much, but if he scores 2 touchdowns, that's fantastic, particularly on FanDuel where he's only 6K. So I'm buying in on Zamir White. I'm hoping people are down on him, avoiding him this week. We'll see. He could be more highly rostered than I'm anticipating because of the lineup or because of the matchup against the Panthers. But if he hits, I'm kind of fine with taking that risk with him. Like if he is 30% rostered and he scores 20 points, cool. I'm going to get different elsewhere.
That's the free square you're always hoping for in those types of tournaments, where if he's over roster but does what he's supposed to, but then again, if he's over roster and doesn't do, then you all suffered as well. Completely coincidentally, you have no idea that you were doing this. Josh Hudson and I traded Zamir White for Jerome Ford a few seasons ago. They were part of another trade. So your second guy right now, you're choosing between me and Josh. I came out with my guy Zamir White in this trade. So.
Yeah. So, I'm going to be honest. I had a hard time picking my second running back for this. I try and pick 2 running backs for this segment so that if you decide to listen to me, you have enough players to build a lineup. I like Jerome Ford. I don't love Jerome Ford this week. Some of this was, again, similar arguments that I've had about him in recent weeks. He's going to get the volume, and the matchup isn't terrible. The New York Giants haven't been killing it against running backs in recent weeks. So, and they just play the Washington Commanders, who, frankly, their offensive line, I don't know any of them by name. So that says everything I need to know right there. Jerome Ford, he's only $5,800 on DraftKings, 65 on FanDuel. So he doesn't need to do a ton to pay off. What I will say I am tracking, I'm just going to throw this out there. I am tracking Raheem Mostert.
Yeah.
Because if he plays, I love the idea of playing him to get leverage on the Devon Achane shares that'll be out there.
Yeah, it's a really good point because Miami is going to need to lean on their running backs, and they're going to probably need to lean on them as pass catchers. And Mostert, like Achane, can take one the length of the field as soon as he touches the ball. Speaking of that game, and again, I might be using a little bit of cash thought process here and buying the injury discount, though Charbonnet is just like not very much cheaper than Kenneth Walker. Everybody's kind of known. It's looking more and more like Kenneth Walker's not playing. And I think in this game where Miami's offense could put them into some very bad situations on defense, we could see Zach Charbonnet, who saw a lot of volume last week, was not very efficient. And I'm hoping against the Miami defense that has given up points to the running back, Austin, we're going to see a little bit better Zach Charbonnet, sort of maybe a coming out party. I'm glad he's at home. I'm glad Miami's offense is going to be led by Skylar Thompson. I'm hoping we're going to see better efficiency because I think he averaged like 2.3 yards per carry last week.
Yeah, I don't mind it. Miami has given up the most points to running backs since week 16 of last season. So I think the matchup is definitely good. And similar with all these other guys, he doesn't need to do much to get there and to pay off. And if Kenneth Walker sits, the role will be there. The volume is there, which is going to be king.
Yeah, for me, I'm just looking at the guys who I'm hoping can pop for 2, maybe even 3 touchdowns. And I'm expecting an ugly game script for Miami. And then obviously, Austin, as you mentioned, you like to break this down so that folks can start a lineup of just your guys. And so you got 4 wide receivers for me.
Yeah, so I'm going to get through the first one kind of quickly. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he is good both in cash and in tournaments this week. I think the volume is going to be there. People might look at the matchup with Arizona and think like, oh, this isn't a great matchup because of the way that we were 2 weeks in DraftKings. It may look like, oh, there's a little red number next to Amon-Ra St. Brown's name. I don't know that I want to play him. Well, again, the Arizona Cardinals just played the Los Angeles Rams. Not a great matchup.
Yep.
I feel good about the volume there for Amon-Ra St. Brown. I also, on the other side of the ball, so this is a little bit in the game theory side of things, I'm trying to pick players from the same matchup because I'm betting on if one team goes off, the other one goes off as well. Yeah. Arizona Cardinals. I'm picking Greg Dortch on the other side of the ball at $4,500 on DraftKings, $5,100 on FanDuel. Detroit has also been really bad against pass catchers since week 16 of last year. They just got eaten alive by Chris Godwin. And Greg Dortch is the slot receiver in Arizona. So I am a big fan of just buying into that this week. He's so cheap. He only needs to score about $4,500. Next up, I have Tank Dell, who is $5,200 on DraftKings. $5,200 for Tank Dell. Sign me up.
It seems like everybody's turning on Tank Dell, including the price makers at DFS. So.
Yeah, he's $6,200 on FanDuel. Here's why I went for him. One, I already said that I'm starting CJ Stroud because the Minnesota Vikings like to blitz. They also like to play zone coverage. Tank Dell is a zone beater. He did really well against the zone last year. He was either the top ranked player on Houston against zone, or he was second just behind Nico Collins. So he's going to be useful in that scheme scenario. So I'm looking for Minnesota to blitz and CJ Stroud to be getting the ball quickly to Tank Dell.
And that you kind of hit what I was going to go with this is with an injured Joe Mixon, Tank Dell seems like the most likely of the big 3 receivers to get more involved because of the lack of running game. Plus Nico Collins coming into this one with an injury designation as well. So
yeah, there you go. And then last I have Adam Thielen.
You fool.
He is $5,000 on DraftKings and $5,100 on FanDuel. Oh, don't you remember last year what happened with Adam Thielen? He was great. He got a bunch of targets. And I feel like Andy Dalton coming in, why not? There's a relationship there. There's an age similarity, similar generation,
exactly
similar style. No, it's just, I think the volume is going to be there now that you have a refresh. I don't want to say more competency because I feel bad about the Bryce Young situation, but it's going to be a better quarterback situation this week. Andy Dalton should be able to come in, kind of right the ship for a little bit. So I expect Adam Thielen to get the targets. Part of the reason I'm picking Adam Thielen is I think more people will be interested in Deontay Johnson being resurrected
100%.
by Andy Dalton coming in. And I want to get some leverage on the Deontay Johnson people.
No, I think that's such a good point. And it's hilarious, but you may be right with the old man connection. Like these are 2 veterans who have been going at it for a long time in this league. And I didn't go look at what Thielen's numbers were in the games where Dalton played last year, but I know Dalton had like a really good first game, like 264 yards and 2 touchdowns when he came in last year. So maybe we see something similar this year. And then Austin, you already talked about Chris Godwin. I agreed with all the reasons you like Chris Godwin. My question to you, he is my favorite tournament play. And that is because I still don't think people see him as sexy enough. Whereas I just love the targets. Am I in the wrong thought here? Is he too chalky? But more importantly, is he a guy who it's worth eating the chalk for?
Well, so actually, as part of this, I want to come back to the Milli Maker winning lineup this week. One of the interesting things about the week 2 winning lineup is that multiple players in the roster had more than 20% rostership. Jordan Mason was 50% rostered in the Milli Maker. Chris Godwin was 23% rostered in the Milli Maker, and J.K. Dobbins was 27% rostered in the Milli Maker.
Yeah.
It's okay to have high rostered guys in your tournament lineup. You have to get different somewhere if you're going to win the lineup, because you need a unique lineup. You can't play
like
all of
Daniel Jones.
Like Daniel Jones, who was 6.9% rostered. But when we look at the rostership percentages of the winning lineup, the lowest one was Marvin Harrison at 3.6. That's not as low as I think most people think they need to get. I think most people think when they're building these lineups, I need to get like the 1% player or the 0.5% player. No. You need to get a little different. Don't get off the wall. So I'm totally fine with playing Chris Godwin even if he is more than 20% rostered.
Okay. I love that. That's such a good point, because I've confessed this to you before. When I first started doing this show with you and still was learning DFS, when I thought get different, I literally was trying to get different with all 9 players on my roster, and it was not working well at all. I was getting some very bad lineups, to where now the first thing I do is I set the main spots, and this is essentially how lineup optimizers work, and I have access to them. I just don't use them, but I set the main part of my lineup, like the 5 guys that I know I want to have in, and Godwin is one of those guys for me this week. And then I go and see what kind of salary I have left, and that's where I look to get different. I don't really pay attention with my first like 5 guys what I think their roster ship's going to be. And J.K. Dobbins was another great example last week, where everybody knew J.K. Dobbins was going to go off, so why not put the money into J.K. Dobbins? And Austin, I alluded to this at the beginning of the show. We're getting into the tight ends. We're talking about how injuries don't affect your day. You have a guy who's not practicing right now, Austin, and things are not looking good for George Kittle. So obviously, if George Kittle's not playing, you're not playing him in tournaments. But let's just say he's a limited participant tomorrow and a full participant on Saturday. Are you confident getting George Kittle into a tournament lineup? Do you think, I guess, was the injury a part of him being one of your favorite picks for tournament?
It was not a part of one of my favorite picks for tournaments. And like, this is one of those like hands up transparency moments. I don't do this full time. I have a full-time job, so I don't track all the injury reports. But from a game theory perspective, the reason I love George Kittle this week is because I think if he plays and Debo sits, people are going to flock to Jauan Jennings. 100%. I want to flock to George Kittle, and I want to pay the salary. I think people are burned by tight ends. I think people are going to look for the cheaper salary. George Kittle, he's $5,700 on DraftKings, and he's got the elite upside. It's always possible for him to score 20, 30 points in a week. The Los Angeles Rams, they have been bad against tight ends, and I think even though the 49ers are almost a touchdown favorites in this game, I'm not going to be shocked if they pour it on in this matchup. It's a divisional matchup. They just lost to the Vikings. They need to right the ship. They need to make sure this offense is ready to go. So it would not shock me if they decided, you know what, I don't care that it's 21-3. We're passing the dang ball to George Kittle, and we're going to make sure that our offense is going well. Now, I will say, if George Kittle does sit, I don't mind going after Jake Ferguson, who also has that nice little questionable.
I was going to say, man, you're going completely questionable at tight end, but I think you're on to something here, because nobody else is going to go Jake Ferguson. This might be one of your, and I'll tell you right now, I think not practicing on Wednesday is enough that people are going to be scared off of George Kittle. So if you pay attention and George Kittle plays, I think your theory is sound. You just need the guy to play, plain and simple. And in your defense, Austin, this news literally just popped like 4 hours ago. If you go look at my rankings right now, George Kittle is my tight end too. I haven't even adjusted for the news yet. So I fully agree with everything you said about George Kittle. It's just, he's scary now.
Yeah, no, that is so fair. The other thing about this that I was saying, and we don't talk about this quite enough because there's so much that we can talk about in any given week, but the 49ers, they play in the
I
4
knew you were going
o'clock
to go to this. Yep.
slate. So, and this week is actually weird. I'm looking at the schedule right now, kind of processing it at a deeper level for the first time right now. There are 5 games in the 4 o'clock slate, which does not often happen.
Ooh.
So there are even more options to pivot to tight end if George Kittle is announced out at late just before the game, or if you are doing really poorly going into the 4 o'clock slate and you're like, you know what, I need to get different. Maybe that's when you do actually pivot to George Kittle, because if he's starting and people are off of him because of injury scares, it could be a way to get contrarian and help move you up the board. So make sure you're paying attention. If you don't watch the 1 o'clock games, just check in around 3:45 on your contest, see how things are going, and then pivot as necessary.
Such a good point. And the same group chat that I'm in that talked about that tournament I asked you about earlier was talking about how late swap is one of the most underutilized aspects of DFS by people who aren't doing this essentially for a living. And that I love how what you just brought up. A lot of people look at late swap as a way to get, injured 4 o'clock players out of your lineup. That's not what this is for. It's for if your lineup went really, really well, but maybe your whole lineup's too chalky, you pivot to a non-chalky guy. Or like Austin said, if you knew everybody was scared of George Kittle and your lineup just feels kind of stuck in the mud, you pivot to George Kittle, because then if he does pop, you're the only one who has him. So what a great thing to bring up. And as I mentioned, Kittle is my tight end too, because I am all in on the rookie. Brock Bowers leads all tight ends in targets right now. Again, Austin, I feel chalky, but again, as I pointed out, the guys who I started this lineup with, those are the guys I'm starting my lineup with. So when I go into either app really right now, except for I'm not paying up for Derek Carr on FanDuel, as Austin pointed out, I immediately throw Derek Carr, Zach Charbonnet, Chris Godwin, Brock Bowers in my defense into my lineup. And then to get different-ish, I will create a lineup where I stack Carr with Olave, and then I'll create a lineup where I stack Carr with Shaheed, and then I'll build out the rest of the lineup. So I'm not worried about Brock Bowers' rostership. He's playing Carolina, who gives up the most or the second most or a lot of points to fantasy tight ends. And I think the Raiders, you can look at this game and be like, well, what if it gets out of hand? The Raiders are a team that has a lot to prove right now. Gardner Minshew is a quarterback that has a lot to prove right now. The Raiders aren't going to have an issue getting out of hand on the Carolina Panthers. So I would love to see maybe they get up early in the first half, passing the ball, and then run Zamir White in the second half. But Brock Bowers is a very important part of that offense very clearly. Devontae Adams has 18 targets through 2 games. Brock Bowers has 17 targets. So is everything we want Devontae Adams to be, Brock Bowers is doing the same thing. He's catching just about everything thrown his way and hasn't found the end zone yet. When this kid starts scoring touchdowns, he's going to be a problem in fantasy football, Austin. So I love every bit of Brock Bowers. I think he finishes this week as the top tight end in fantasy football, and he's not the most expensive in DFS. So that just makes him my favorite play.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a perfectly fine pick. I think he's also a good person to pivot to if George Kittle is ruled out around 3 o'clock, or if your lineup's doing really well and you just want to play into the chalk and say, you know what, I just need to stay where I'm at, pivot to Brock Bowers because he might be highly rostered. The only thing I'm going to push back on is don't put Derek Carr and Brock Bowers in your lineup every single time, my guy. Like you gotta diversify a little bit.
I meant so today I make my first run of lineups. Tomorrow I will start making my second run where I won't build any Derek Carr lineups at all. So
yeah, I just know how you get with guys like A.T. Perry. So I got to check on you every now and then.
Yeah, no, those are just my best ball lineups, because when he starts playing football in week 14 or 15, he is going to take me right out of 12th place and into 8th place. I can't wait for it. So, yeah, mistakes for me. No, the way I do lineups is I start prepping for our show this morning, and I start building my first run of lineups this morning. And so my first run of lineups are always with my favorite quarterback. And I do have Stroud lineups. I do have Baker Mayfield lineups. So I don't even do all Derek Carr today. But for the ones that like, I'm going to make money, that's how I start. So like I'll have like 5 lineups that are Derek Carr, Brock Bowers, Chris Godwin, and then I just try to diversify those a little bit. And those are, like I said, those are mainly in that tournament I was telling you right now with the guaranteed overlay. So we'll see how that goes. And then I'll decide what I want my Milli Maker tournament to look like. But we can't build these lineups without a defense, Austin.
Yeah. So first off, we are going to start with, oh, well, I was trying to put a timestamp in here and then my phone was like, we can't do that anymore. Anyways, so
you talk, I'll timestamp.
Yeah. I am going with the Bears, Chicago Bears. They are $2,600 on DraftKings. Disrespect, and $3,800 on FanDuel. They've been good.
They have played so well this season.
They kept Chicago in that game against Houston on, I guess, can't remember if it was Sunday or Monday night, but one of the primetime, it was Sunday night because my Falcons went on Monday night. They kept them in the game against a really good Houston offense, and they're now getting the matchup against a guy that just threw 3 interceptions. Like, I love the matchup there, and I think people are still not giving the Bears the respect that they deserve. And I could see people just thinking that Anthony Richardson is going to be too much for them, which I think is a little bit misguided because he has the high variance. That's the type of thing you want to bet against in tournaments and you want to like lean into is the variance. So I'm going with the Bears. They've scored defensive touchdowns. So I feel really good about where they are.
And what I find interesting about Anthony Richardson is a good Anthony Richardson game doesn't necessarily mean a bad Bears game because Anthony Richardson's going to turn the ball over, plain and simple. That kid has no touch. When I was watching that last drive where he was trying to mount the comeback last week, and he's firing balls to your guy, Alec Pierce. But the fact of the matter is Pierce, I talked about this on Wednesday. Pierce ran this beautiful comeback route. Like, gorgeous route, was going to be able to tiptoe the sideline. Richardson tosses this ball 5 yards past him where he started the comeback. I think Anthony Richardson sees and fires and does not care where the wide receiver is supposed to be yet. And I'm not saying he can't get better. I'm just saying the kid has a cannon and there is no off switch. Like, literally, he is just firing the ball. And I say all of this to say, even if you think Anthony Richardson's going to come out here and ball, the Bears could allow 28 points in this game, but if they walk away with 2 turnovers and a touchdown, and they took 2 back in week 1 against Will Levis, if they come back out of this game with 2 turnovers and a touchdown, you're going to be very happy about what you get out of the Chicago Bears, even against a good Anthony Richardson. And I alluded to this earlier for my pick. The Rams are depleted. I love that you brought up, Austin, that quite possibly they're not going to look to they're not going to look to take their foot off the gas in this game because they're going to see a division opponent. They just lost last week. So obviously they need to get better and they need to prove to the division that they still matter in this division. You're going against Matthew Stafford with no Cooper Kupp, no Puka Nacua, no Tyler Higbee. It's all new faces that Stafford has almost no chemistry with. Tutu Atwell is like the longest tenured player on this team right now. And I like Tutu Atwell, but he's not going to be able to step in and do the things like the guys Matt Stafford is missing. The 49ers smell blood in the water. They saw what the Cardinals did last week. So it's not even just that they have to prove themselves over their own loss. They also have to prove they're better than the Cardinals. So they may come out here and try to beat the Rams worse than the Cardinals did. So I think on defense, Fred Warner is playing out of his mind right now. I think these are the kind of things, the good indicators you like to see as we move into this matchup in this division.
Yeah, I love it.
And then we pointed out before too that Jordan Mason could just control the game. So this is one I like when I could see running backs control the game, and all the Rams have is a running back. So it could be a Kyron Jordan Mason game, which could still work out well for their defense. On to the head-to-head, the Valedictorian Shootout. Austin, last week I took you down last week. I did some great lineup building. More on that in just a few moments and join the class. But the first section of this is just me versus Austin. This is not necessarily the lineup we're going to be running against you. In fact, it's probably not going to be the lineup we're running against you. But I scored 146.7, Austin 107. So I go up 0-2. Austin, I gave myself a little cushion to do better than Kelly did last season. I know you're going to come back on this eventually. And honestly, if I'm going to put a bad lineup together, this one kind of feels like my bad lineup. As always, I will announce my lineup first. We are doing this in DraftKings scoring. This is just me versus Austin for fun and bragging rights. So you're going to hear most of these names for a second time. So I'm going Derek Carr, Zach Charbonnet, and I got Jordan Mason and Chris Godwin. I went Jackson Smith and Jigba because we are going DraftKings scoring. So I'm going with the PPR guys. But as I mentioned, I'm either stacking with Rashid Shaheed or Chris Olave. This lineup fit Chris Olave. Wan'Dale Robinson, I'm using Austin's own guys against him in this one. But again, he's a guy I like in DraftKings lineups. And obviously, Brock Bowers, the San Francisco 49ers. Austin, what are you throwing at me?
Yeah, so a lot of guys that I mentioned, but some that you'll have to check out the A-list to see what I have to say about them. So we've got Kyler Murray at $6,900, Jordan Mason at $6,200, Jerome Ford at $5,800, and then I've got 4 receivers. We're going Amon-Ra St. Brown, $8,200, Chris Godwin at $6,500, Jauan Jennings at $4,100, and Deontay Johnson at $4,900. In the tight end spot, I've got Pat Freiermuth at $4K, and then the Green Bay Packers is my defense at $3,300. Hopefully we right the ship on cash games this week. It's honestly, I've been doing better in tournaments this year so far than I have in cash, which is wild to me. I think that's going to pivot over the course of the year. One thing, just quick note about cash, it's a 17-week process. The goal is to be profitable over 17 weeks. That's why you play cash. Tournaments, you're trying to win big in the week.
And I want to give Austin another shout out. I've been doing shows with Austin for 3 years now. And another thing about that, be disciplined about your bankroll. Know what your budget is. So that way you don't overblow 1 week and then have an even bigger hole to dig yourself out of. As he mentioned, it's a 17-week process. And I can all but guarantee Austin knows exactly how much money he wants to put in over those 17 weeks because it's all about the discipline. If you're doing this to try to turn even just a small profit, it's about discipline. Don't throw bad money at bad money. Don't dig the hole deeper than it needs to be. So I love that point out of you, Austin. Speaking of doing well in tournaments, I was able to guarantee that I would not mispronounce the username of the winner of this week's Join the Class, our DraftKings and FanDuel tournaments. That's because your boy took down both tournaments on DraftKings, the Ryan 13, 154.72 on FanDuel, the Ryan 113, because I already had an account and things got messed up with my username. So I had to add the extra one in there, 161.14. Every week we will announce the winner. It will not be me probably again. So this was fun while it lasted. Don't think that if you're coming in here, it's always me and Austin in first and second place. It's not. It's almost never me and Austin in first and second place. We have regulars who do take these tournaments down, but there's almost always openings if you guys are looking to jump in. Those links are in the description of this video and in Austin's article that drops every Saturday. Austin, tell them a little bit about your article and if you have other things going on.
Yeah, you can catch the A-list every week. It drops on Saturdays. It's my DFS Cash article. I talk about some of the players to talk about here. So if you don't want to go and search back in this video, which you should because we're great. But if you don't want to, I have it written down. And I'll add a couple of other guys in there. Like I didn't talk about my cash running backs in today's segment. So check that article out for that. And then catch me here every week with DFS Academy, and then catch me and Josh Hudson on our Thursday Showdown slate episodes, which are about 20-minute episodes. So it's way shorter than this if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah, this show is always going to run an hour. That one only runs about 20 minutes. So, and that comes out the day before this. So we drop these on Friday. That comes out on Thursday. But I guarantee you, Austin's making money off of his DFS advice and we're making money off of his DFS advice. You should be doing the exact same thing. If you're not following Club Fantasy, hit that subscribe button on YouTube, like, comment, do all the things that other content creators tell you to do. But most importantly, just hit that subscribe button. We very much appreciate it. We go live like 10 times a week. We do like 12 shows a week, some that aren't live. We cover everything from DFS to redraft and waivers, dynasty trades. We have shows dedicated just to dynasty trades. We are here to help you guys get better at fantasy football, and all we ask of you is to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. For Austin, I'm Ryan. I hope you guys have a wonderful DFS weekend. I hope your players stay extremely healthy. Lord knows we need it. Have a great one, guys.